Good morning. So looks like many of us are actually super interested into Claude Code. Looks like according to the room. The question is, do we actually know Claude Code that well? So out of curiosity, yesterday I decided to look around and try to find an answer for the following question. How many features do you have inside of Claude? It's actually hard to find how many they are, but I could find the number of slash commands that you have available at the moment. So 96. And honestly, I didn't look into Twitter today, so I don't know if it's actually 97, because things are going too fast, super fast. It's hard to keep up with what is happening. So during the past few months, I have been running workshops with companies where I actually teach about Anthropic Claude Code thing. And I realized one thing, is that often we start with Claude Code, and since it's so powerful, you start writing code, you start debugging code, you start fixing bugs, all of that stuff, and quickly you stop. You stop for a reason, because it's so powerful that you see a huge increment in your performance, in your productivity, that you actually don't feel the need to dig deeper into the tool. Is that helpful? But there's something more that you can do. At least I believe so. So I believe that most of us get to the 5 to 10%, and we don't keep digging because it's actually that powerful. And also, if you do that in January, now there's so many new things, and it's hard to keep up. So my goal for this session today is the following. I want to go through 4 different types of things with you. Things that you can set up and take advantage of them in your Claude Code installation forever, things that you can do in your daily workflow, so small tips, small tricks that you can do in your day-to-day to improve your cycle. Also, I want to go through things that make Claude actually extensible, and how do I use them in my day-to-day. And finally, I want to touch some other use cases besides code. So we tend to think about Claude Code, but there's something more that you can do with it. That's the goal for today. I just want to warn you something important about this talk. This is not a getting started talk with Claude Code, okay? So the goal of this talk is for those that there was one day that they opened the terminal and they ran Claude. So they tried something with Claude. I want to share with you things that come from my experience that I actually use. So I have no affiliation with Anthropic at all, so this is not a sales talk. This is basically a talk coming from someone that uses it every day, teaches this thing to other people, and actually really likes it. So I want to share not only the features, I want to share the types of problems that they solve in my day-to-day. And I will go through those that I use a lot by those categories. Also, it's important to say that this is basically a rapid-fire type of talk. So I will share with you roughly 40 tips during 1 hour, so keep up. The goal is not to go deep into each one, is to share what you can do with it, okay? And then, if by the end of this session, tomorrow or next week, you can apply 2 or 3 of those 40, for me is a huge success. It means that you took something home that you were not familiar, and that can actually help you in your day-to-day. Okay, that's our mission for today. I hope you are happy with that, because we are about to start a journey. So the first thing that we need to clarify is, where do we run Claude Code? We can install it in many different ways. You can run it as a terminal, okay? You open your terminal of choice and you start working, or it can be something like the desktop application nowadays, Claude as one, or inside of an IDE like VS Code. The thing is, the terminal is where usually you get the features first. So usually I use that one. That's why you'll see a ton of print screens of features inside of the terminal. That doesn't mean that they are not available on the other platforms, but keep that in mind. Usually they come first in the terminal. So that's why I usually use the terminal. So let's go to the setup type of things. The things that you want to do once and benefit from them for the rest of your life using Claude Code, until Claude Code is replaced for other things. So the first thing that is important to mention is we need to talk about the most important artifact that you have inside of a project where you use Claude Code. That is the Claude.md. If you come from other tools, you might be familiar with agents.md. So Claude.md is the same thing. So it's basically the heart and the soul of the agent that you have in your project. So you describe so many different things there, from rules to what's inside of that project, the frameworks, how to run certain commands, and all of that. Sometimes I come to the conclusion, after working for a while with one project, that eventually I start seeing a ton of duplication. I start seeing that I have information in many different places. For example, rules into different markdown files, descriptions inside of a README and inside of the Claude.md, instructions on how to run the pipeline inside of a README.md and also inside of my Claude.md. And you can actually avoid that duplication, okay? The Claude.md can use the @ symbol to import a given file. You just need to mention the path, and when the Claude session starts, it will load not only the Claude.md, but also will load those files that you mentioned there, okay? So it's one quick tip to improve and avoid duplication, okay? And that's extremely useful, and you can even use it with files that are not markdown files. For example, if you have the scheme of an API and you feel it's important for that project, you can do it that way. You can even have a relative path over there. But don't take this too far. Why? I used to believe that the Claude.md was so important that any single thing that I could think about it, I would add it to there. So it would be extremely descriptive. So last year, if I was here delivering the same talk, I would say, anything that comes to mind, please write it to the Claude.md in order to improve the performance of your agent. Things changed. This thing is so fresh, so new, that many of the things that we say, they are actually based on feelings, on personal opinions, on things that we read here, we read there, we listen someone talking about them during a talk, or anything like that. But actually, they might not be true. So someone took the challenge of running a study, ETH Zurich. So they did the following. They went through a study with many different projects. They created the Claude.md and the agents.md. Inside of those projects, they used ones without the Claude.md, others with machine-generated Claude.md, and another ones with human-curated Claude.md. And they reached one conclusion, that when you have something so specific with so many different instructions, eventually you will see the performance will start to drop, and the cost will actually increase more than 20%. Okay? And nowadays, tokens are quite expensive. So what should you do instead? Nowadays, I followed 3 questions that I try to find an answer for them in order to review my Claude.md. Okay? So as a summary, they concluded that it is better a human to maintain that Claude.md than relying on the machine to update the Claude.md. So what types of questions you can ask when you are reviewing the Claude.md? The first one is, do I need this for every single type of thing? So in the context of this project, 95% of the conversations that I will have, is this information actually relevant to produce a better outcome? If not, maybe let's move it away, let's evaluate. Otherwise, let's keep it there. Second question, is it something specific that I only run once in a while? Is it something specific that only matters for a given type of files? Imagine that you have a project that has different technologies inside, like .NET and JavaScript and Python. Some rules might only be required for one of the projects. For example, the instructions to run the tests will be specific depending on the technology. So on such cases, you can do one of 2 things. Either create an agent skill and move those instructions over there, or create something that we call a Claude rules file. Those files live inside of your .claude folder, and the benefit is that you can use a Claude pattern, so you can filter to a given type of files or to a given folder. So they only apply when you get there, when you are working with those files. And finally, an important one that you should ask is, does my agent is capable of finding it alone? Because sometimes I used to write things like the complete tree of files and folders. So basically the overview how to navigate my code. Where do I put controllers? Where do I put models? Where do I put views? Where do I put services? my infrastructure folder, what's inside. So I will try to describe that to have a clear landscape, like a map, so the agent would know where I like to put things. But actually, agents are quite smart nowadays, so those instructions eventually might be outdated, and now you have a problem. And actually, for an agent, understanding what you have inside of your disk, inside of your folder, is not that hard. So the recommendation from ETH Zurich is actually don't add those things that the agent can quickly find it. Okay? So for those, skip those. That's the main idea. Then it comes the second level. That is, when I work with the Claude.md, especially in projects with other people, sometimes there's a couple of things that they are actually personal preferences. For example, I'm a huge fan of test-driven development, but I work with people that actually don't like it, okay? So I don't want to force the others to go through it. There's a couple of things that are specific to me. How can I do it? Because my default idea was basically, okay, let's put that thing inside of my Claude.md. But actually, Claude.md might not be the one, because the Claude.md is the one that you share with your team, but actually you have one that is specific for you. If you go to your .claude folder and you create a claude.local.md, you can git ignore that file, and Claude will pick it as well. So it will put your own preferences into the context window and will use them. And you don't impact the other people. But now let's say that this preference is actually something that I like to use it in every single type of thing that I do with Claude Code. On such cases, that's not the place, because this will be living inside of your repo. What do? Is that you go to your user profile. So on Windows is a slightly different place. It's on your app data folder. On macOS is something like that. And you'll find a .claude folder over there, and you can create a Claude.md that applies to every single session that you open with Claude in your own machine. Let's say that you like concise language, okay, or you prefer communication with bullet points. Just write it there, and it will apply in every single session that you have with Claude Code. Extremely useful for that type of scenario. Now, one extremely important, and please do this one, okay? That is the following. Do you know that Claude Code can be quite helpful, right? It's always saying, you are right, let's do it. No, I was wrong, sorry for that. And when you ask Claude to do something, he will actually try to achieve the mission. It's like the goal of his life, if he had a life, maybe one day we'll have, I don't know. But you give a mission, and Claude Code will start working on that until the moment that it's actually done. So let's say that I'm fixing a bug regarding a database connection. Okay? I have an exception, I pick that exception, I prompt Claude saying, please help me fix this thing. Claude goes during a journey to find the reason, and eventually we'll realize that it might be a problem with connection string. So it starts looking around into things like your settings, into things like your environment files, into things like your app settings, depending on the technology that you use. And that's actually a problem. Why? Because now those will go to your context window, and if they go to your context window, they go to Anthropic. Okay? That's not great. And the problem is that by default, the tools don't lead you to take the best decisions in these cases. So what you should do after this session is to go to your project where you work with your team, create a file named settings.json inside of your .claude folder, and there you have a JSON that is a collection where you say permission deny. And there you can put a deny to read files like environment files, app settings files, all of those types of files. Also, you can deny running certain types of bash commands. For example, if any of you is a .NET developer, there's one that is the .NET user secrets. You can deny that one, and no one in your team can do it. Ideally, no one brings production keys into the local repo, but it happens, you know that, right? So you want to be the one taking care of the rest of the team, so you want to put that over there. And also, the important note is that the same thing that I told you about the different Claude.mds, you can do the same with the settings. That means that you can go to your global profile in your machine and go to the settings.json that will be there, and you can deny certain types of things so you don't forget them next time that you are working with another project. Okay? This is super important. Last tip for setup type of things. Sometimes I'm working with Claude, and I start a conversation inside of a given folder, in a given repo. I keep working with it for a while. I might open a couple of terminals as well to work in different things. Eventually, I don't know where I'm working, because I'm doing several things at the same time, and now I don't know what's the thing that I'm doing, where I'm working, what I'm seeing. And actually, you can do that thing. So you can create a status line that will always show up under the place where you write the prompt. And you can prompt Claude to add things to there. And you can use natural language for that, by the way. So you can say things like those. Those are my favorite ones. Git branch, the model that I'm using, the context that is available. For example, am I consuming 2% or 80%? You can see that available at any given moment while you are working, okay? And if you don't like those, do the following. Ask Claude which ones are available. And Claude will suggest a couple of things that might be useful, so you can always do that. So with this, I close my topic of things that you have for the day-to-day. Now let's go to the big one, okay? So be ready. Daily workflow type of things. If you have been using Claude or Copilot or whatever, I suspect that you are already using something like the plan mode. So the idea with the plan mode is that before asking your agent to go and do something and achieve a mission, first come up with a plan, with a strategy, and then let's execute that strategy. Otherwise, we are kind of like trying to go to a given place without knowing where we should go. We are just trying. Okay? Eventually, we'll get there, but it's not the most efficient way of doing it. One thing that used to happen a lot to me is that I will see the plan, I will ask Claude to plan the change, and I would read that plan, yes, because sometimes I read it, and I would see something that I don't like the strategy or something like that, and my default way to fix it would be to prompt again. So instead of doing X, let's do Y, something like that. Actually, you can do something a bit smarter, especially when it's something smaller, so like a tiny little change inside of that document. There's one or two lines that you don't like. And that is as simple as the following. When you do the Shift-Tab thing to go into plan mode, and you get the plan, just use Ctrl-G. Why? Ctrl-G will basically open the plan as a markdown in edit mode. So you can navigate through that file, adjust whatever you want, save it, go back to the terminal, and keep going. Basically, you are sharing the plan with Claude Code. Okay? If you are in the context of something like VS Code, it actually seems so integrated that looks like magic, okay, to a point. So do that. See the plan. If you find one or two lines that you don't like the strategy, instead of prompting again, just go there, Ctrl-G, open the markdown, edit one or two things, save it, and keep going. Okay? You save time, you save tokens, you save your sanity as well. Talking about plans, my favorite thing nowadays is the following. I love to come up with plans first. I love something named specification-driven development. That is when you first come up with a spec, then that is a huge document, and then you prompt your agent, let's implement this thing. I like that approach. But sometimes I come to the conclusion that I'm not seeing the full picture when I prompt the system to come up with the specification. And also, I realize that often Claude is trying to fill the gaps with assumptions. And I don't know the assumptions until the moment that something is actually implemented. So nowadays, I do the following. I ask Claude to interview me. There's something inside of Claude that is named the Ask User Question tool. That is a tool that they call whenever you are in the plan mode. Usually, you might see something like a multi-options, like, do you want to do this with option A or with option B? Or do you want to suggest something else? That's the Ask User Question tool in action. What I like to do is to force Claude to use it. So I will prompt Claude with things like, please interview me about every single thing that I have inside of this document that might be an assumption. Don't stop until every single thing is clear. And I will start understanding that I have so many different assumptions that I never thought about them. Okay? This is extremely useful. You can also update the specification again, based on that clarification process. Is super useful. Regarding to plans again, other thing that it tends to happen is that first you come up with a plan, it comes back with, do you want to go with approach A or approach B? For example, do you want to go with MVC controllers, or do you want to use plain endpoints like a minimal APR or fast endpoints style of application? And you might choose one of them. Let's say I want to go with MVC style of application. Then it starts implementing the thing, and by the end, you look into the code and you'll see, I don't like this. This seems too much for what the application is doing. So what do? You prompt Claude again, asking to convert the thing into the fast approach, the minimal API approach. So you prompt again. What is happening during that moment is that basically you are adding a new message into the context. And all the past research, all the past implementation stays there. So the past implementation will impact the future iterations. What is not great, besides the fact that it consumes tokens as well. So what can you do instead? Actually, Claude Code has kind of like a time travel thing inside. The same way that you can do a git revert, you can do a rewind with Claude Code. So if you want to get back in history in the conversation, you just do double escape or /rewind, and you can always go back and pick, I want to go back to this point where I decided to go with option A, and I actually want to prompt it in a different way. So instead of trying to fix it by moving forward, give one step back to then go forward, okay? That's the tip. Regarding plans, we now have a strategy, right? So one thing that you should know about plans is that that's the moment where you are actually doing the heavy lifting work, okay? That's where reasoning is actually important. Having a powerful model is actually super important. But then, once you have a proper plan that is detailed, sending that plan to a cheaper model is a good idea, because you will save time, you will save tokens, and it's just following instructions. A cheaper model can do it as well. So actually, you can switch the model in the middle of a conversation. You don't need to take that decision and stick with it forever. But better than that, and by the way, this is great when you use that status line, because you can see in the status line which model you are using at the moment. But better than this is the fact that each model is not by the fact that you are using Opus or Sonnet, that you have basically two levels. There's several levels inside of each model. Each model can run in different effort levels. So you can actually run the /effort and say from now on, I'm using Opus, but with the extra high effort. You will spend more money, okay? But for complex tasks, it's extremely useful. By doing this, you are actually changing the rest of the conversation. From that point on, all the different things that you'll be doing will be running with extra level, okay? It might be to a higher level or to a lower level, okay? You can do that both ways. But what if I want to run just one prompt, okay? The one like, think about this, or fix this bug, just as prompt with proper effort, with extra effort. They have something that I think is quite funny, that is this idea of the ultra-think. And the cool thing is that if you write ultra-think inside of the prompt, you write the prompt and you write ultra-think, it will actually look like a rainbow. I don't know why. But it's basically saying, okay, this prompt is super important. Do your best. Use the tokens that you need to use to find a solution for this. That's the big idea. Now I need a break for be able to keep up with the rest. Sorry for this. Okay, so now you send Claude on a journey, implement this thing, get back to me when you have a solution for this complex thing that I'm doing. What's next? The next thing is that it will start working, but do you know that sometimes Claude is working and you need to wait for it to finish to ask a question? Because if you write another prompt, it will actually go to the queue and will only be executed afterwards, right? So what you can do instead is to run something like this, /btw, or / by the way. That's the thing. So Claude is working for 5 minutes. You are waiting. You need to ask something about the past conversation. You don't want to start a new session, otherwise you don't have the context. So what you do, you run the slash by the way, and you ask the question. It runs it in parallel, and you get the answer, and it keeps going. No blocker. Super useful. Now we need to talk about cost, right? So, and I will show you this because this has a ton of information that can be useful to understand how do you use Claude, and also because it's awesome when you do an end-of-year review and you want to post on LinkedIn. That is, you can use the slash usage, and you'll get a graphic like this, where you can see the model that you use the most, when do you use the model the most. There's a tons of things here regarding each model that you use. Also, if you have an API key-based consumption model, you can see the cost as well without leaving your terminal. And you'll find more details here than in the website, okay? That's why it's interesting as well. Cost is highly related to context. We know that. So context is basically our context window, is the things that we send in the conversation to Anthropic, so the prompt is evaluated. Each prompt is basically a huge conversation, so we need to maintain that. We know that. And at a given moment, when you see your application at 60% of context, you can always run the slash context, and you'll see a cool visualization like this with all of that. But what I want to challenge you to start doing is the following, and you can do that today or tomorrow. Open a session with Claude, an empty one, okay? Just a new one, and run slash context, and see what is there. Because more often than not, you have a ton of things inside of your context window that they are only used once in a while. Things like MCP servers that you installed back in the day just to explore them, or things like you installed an agent skill from someone because it looks cool, but you don't use it in the day-to-day. All of those are loaded by default, and they will be there. And when you run this in an empty session, if you see that you have, for example, 4%, 5%, 6% of context window taken without doing anything, it's a good way to do an audit to that. And why that's so important, if, for example, with Opus we have 1 million tokens, for a reason. While 1 million is the limit of the model, actually, from experience of many different people, there's many different reports. We don't have a study that proves this. Is one of those things that might be a feeling, honestly. But according to many different people, once you go above the 40 to 50% consumption of the context window, you get into something that a guy named Dexter Orthy from Human Layer calls it the dump zone. Why? You actually start seeing that the quality of the responses, the accuracy, the grounding of the response is not as good. And also it takes more time. And what happens when you reach the limit? Usually, Claude will go and run something that we call the compact. It runs it automatically. You don't need to do anything. What is the compact? It's basically looking to that huge conversation, coming up with a summary, and replacing most of the messages with a summary. So now we have an idea of what we are working on. We keep the main facts, and we can keep going on with the conversation. So we go from the 99% of consumption to maybe 15 or 20%. But actually, you can be the one triggering that. And often we don't do it. We ignore it. So I challenge you that from now on, once you see that you are above in the dump zone, okay, above the 50% type of thing, start thinking, what if I run the compact here? Because it's actually useful, and you'll see the difference afterwards. Don't try to keep with the same session forever, just running the compacts. It's important to frequently do the other thing, that is a new conversation. So starting the conversation again, the slash clear as well. One important thing talking about context is that actually there's something inside of Claude that can become a problem eventually once you work in the same project for a long time. There's something that is called the memories. You are familiar with them. In the keynote, we learned how dangerous they can be. But memories can be quite useful because they save preferences. And the cool thing is that actually Claude has something named auto memories. So it can actually understand from the meaning that it should store something into a memory file. Let's use an example. If you are working with Claude and you get an answer, and you write back something like, I prefer to see this type of information as a diagram. Claude might look into that, and will realize, oh, next time that I have the same type of question, I will come up with a diagram. That goes into a memory. Memory is just a file. The thing is that that information will stay there forever, okay, in that project. And eventually, you might not need that. It might be something that you ask just for the context of the project that you are working on or the activity that you are doing. And now that thing is going to your context. So what you can do is actually run the slash memory to see what you have there. Running an audit. By the way, one of the most interesting experiences in my life, I hope my wife is not watching this, was going to my ChatGPT memories. You should try it, because sometimes ChatGPT was calling me Emily. I don't know why. And I realized that they stored things that don't make sense at all. And going to this type of memories sometimes to clean those memories is actually useful, and you improve the outcomes by the end. Because the memories tend to be a bit, they have a lifetime. Okay? Eventually they are outdated. They are not useful at all. Regarding saving context, I have this habit that when I need to commit something, I ask Claude to commit for me, okay? I have to confess. Why? Because it's so comfortable to have Claude writing the commit message. But for other things like running an NPM test or NPM run or a .NET run, a .NET test, something like that, you can actually run the exclamation point. With the exclamation point, you go into bash mode. That means that every single thing that you type after will be executed as a bash command, okay? And will skip the reasoning process of thinking about your instruction. So Claude doesn't look into Git status and thinks about what do I need to do with this. We skip that part. But keep in mind that the result of that command will go back into the context window, okay? So if it's something that is exposing sensitive information, don't do it in the context of Claude, because eventually it will go into the context window. It might be a problem. It might happen to you. It happens to me a lot. For example, a couple of weeks ago, I was working with a project with a client, and I had to stop it because I came to Oslo. I'm from Portugal. And I stopped that. I closed all of the things that I have around in my laptop, so I would be focusing on the workshop that I was delivering and in this talk. Next week, I want to get back to that work. One thing that you can do, if you want to get back to a previous thing that you are doing, and you want to keep going work, is actually running that is named the dash continue, or slash continue, or the dash resume. The continue will basically go back in time and look what's the most recent thing that you are doing? Okay, let's keep going with that one. The resume will display all the past conversations in that project, and you can pick the one that you want to go back. So even when you are moving back and forward between tasks, it can be extremely useful. But more useful than that is the following. Story time. A couple of weeks ago, my father had to go to an exam at an hospital, and he asked me to go to pick him at the hospital. But I was working in a project, and I was in a rush. Usually, what will happen is that I would even be late, or late for picking my father at the hospital, or late in the project. So what I've done is that I actually run the slash remote control. This will open a tunnel with Anthropic. And then I pick my phone, I go to wherever I need to go, my laptop is at home, and I keep working through my phone, okay? I keep prompting. This one is extremely useful, because nowadays, I do this not only for this type of tasks, but also when I'm, for example, I define my plan, now I just need to execute the plan, I pick my phone, I go for a walk, and then I get a notification from Claude asking, do you want to continue? Do you approve this change, or something like that? And I just say yes or no, and things keep going, and I get the feature that I want. And I don't need to stay at the desk. We might have a discussion about work-life balance, I know, but I honestly believe that it's better this way than being always stressed that you can't do anything, okay? So trust me on this one. Other thing that actually changed the way that I work, and I get if you don't agree with me, okay? That is the following. Do you remember back in the days where when everyone was at the same time at the office? It might still be your case, but before the pandemic, everyone was in that environment. So I could go to my colleague desk and I would start explaining a problem that I'm having, and at the middle of the conversation I would say, ignore it, I know what to fix it, right? We call to that rubber ducking, right? For some reason, when we speak, there's some connections that start to appear. But when we write, it's a bit harder. At least to me, with me, is that way that it works. The cool thing is that Claude exposes a voice mode. So if you go to your Claude code and you write and you type /voice, you can enable the voice mode. From that moment on, if you just press your spacebar, it basically is listening to you. So you can write the prompt with voice. You might say, okay, but when I'm talking, I'm not as eloquent as when I'm writing. My thoughts are not as expressive or not as well defined. That's fair, okay? I understand that. However, the LLM doesn't care if you rumble, okay? You'll find meaning. And oftentimes, in the middle, you will understand that actually you were wrong, and you can always go and edit the prompt that will come from that. Using voice is one of those things that actually changed the way that I work. I get it. If you work in something like an open office, it's a bit awkward. But when we are at home, at least try it. Talking about this voice thing, so we have text, we have audio, right? We are prompting through audio. So to this we call the multimodal LLMs. There's the other component, that is images. For those that work with UIs, like front-end development, you can actually paste images into the terminal, okay? Not only into the applications that Claude exposes, into the terminal as well. Just one quick note, if you are on Mac OS, that's actually Control. So Command V doesn't work, it's Control V. And you can also drag and drop images into the terminal, what is quite cool. And the cool thing about this is that you have an idea of what you want to build. For example, you go to the website of a given company or from a designer, or someone sends you a Figma or something like that, and you take a print screen of something, you can paste it on the conversation and ask Claude to do something similar. Now Claude has not only the text part, but a visual against that can compare to, okay, to find information from that visual. Is extremely useful. The other thing that is changing the way that we work is basically that we used to be so focused in one task, and everyone would say, just do one thing, and when you finish, go to the next one. Nowadays, I think that everyone expects that we are working in many things in parallel. Because otherwise, we just ask the agent to do something, and we are just waiting, and waiting, and waiting. And then he asks, do you accept? Accept, and waiting, and waiting. What is quite boring. So we start working in many different things at the same time. Working in different projects, that's fine, okay? You just open two terminals, there's no big deal. The problem is that most of us work with Git, and sometimes you want to work in two different things for the same project, like a feature, fixing a bug, doing a code review, all of those at the same time. Actually, now you can do that with work trees. It's a bit strange concept because we didn't used to use it, but it was there. But it's basically like having the same branch branching out in virtual branches. Think about it in that way. So this opens this possibility. But you'll have a problem, because now you are working in several different things at the same time. So you might have many different terminals at the same time, and you don't know where you are doing what, okay, at a given point. So what do you do for that? There's actually something named the /caller and /rename. So you can pick a caller for that conversation and assign a name. So I can say, this one is the bug fix number X. This one is the feature number Y. And when you look into the different terminals, you will use the visual recognition to understand that the blue one is the feature, the red one is the bug, and all of that, okay? Tiny little detail, but when you are trying to work with many different things at the same time, is actually great. The other thing that is not great is that when you are working in parallel, having to babysit Claude Code, because it's always asking for permissions. Do you accept this? Do you accept this? Do you accept that? Nowadays, there's a new feature. This one is quite new. Okay, it's not one from the old ones, it's one from the new ones. That is the goal. Now you can write /goal and define what you need Claude to do, and also a condition to stop. Basically, think about this like a measurable objective. You can say something like, implement this. Let's say that we are building an invoice generator, something like that. I can prompt Claude, build me the invoice generator feature, an endpoint, and only stop when you have a test that generates an invoice that has a PDF like this one, for example. So this way, Claude goes in the journey and won't stop until that moment. Okay? Tokens, yes, a lot. Also, this one goes quite well together with another thing new that I don't have in the slides, that is the auto mode. The auto mode is a way that Claude is basically taking the decision if something is safe to accept or not, like a bash command, for you, okay? You don't, for those that we recognize that they are safe, Claude will take the decision for you, but that also has an extra cost in the day-to-day. Final thing about working in parallel is that now you can do this. You can run Claude agents. So if you have ever used something like a cursor in the agent mode or the codex, you can start Claude with agents. So when you run Claude, instead of just starting with Claude, start with Claude agents, and you go into the agents dashboard. From there, you can start seeing things like this. For example, do I have any task that is in progress that needs an input that is blocked? Do I have anything that is still working, or every single thing is completed? And you can start generating new tasks. So if you want to work in things in parallel for the same project, this one is great and super helpful because it's easier to do it through one single window than having to manage many different tabs, for example. Okay, it's not for everyone, I would say. You might be used to one of the approaches and you prefer that one, but that's fine. Let's go to the platform thing. So I see Claude not only as a development tool, but also as a platform, because we can extend Claude. You might be familiar with things like sub-agents, for example, or many other concepts like skills, for example. All of those are basically extension points. So Claude is running a set of tools, and they are finding a way that you can define your own tools to run. But there's one that I really like to use, and I don't see people using it as often as I believe they should. That is this idea of hooks. And I like to use hooks for the following. I like to save money, and I like to spot my mistakes as soon as possible, okay? It might be because I was used to test-driven development, but when something is wrong, I want to stop. So what you can actually do is to go to your settings.json, the same one where you define the permissions deny, and you can have there a post tool use that is a hook. A hook is basically, let me tell Claude that after doing this thing, for example, since it's a post, let's run this command that I have here. So that command will run outside of the context window, okay? So it doesn't consume your tokens, so you save money, okay? That's one of the important parts, but also can stop you during the process, and you can understand that something went wrong. Okay, that's extremely useful, and this is one of those that I recommend, especially if nowadays you have inside of your Claude.md instructions like the following. Always run the tests by the end. If you have something like that, instead of consuming tokens through the Claude.md and expecting that Claude will always run it, use a hook. It's extremely useful. Let's go to the favorite one of most people, that is agent skills. So everyone has agent skills. Everyone is shopping around in the web for agent skills. Agent skills is basically packaging a set of instructions into a set of files, and inside you will have a description that the LLM will load that description by default, so Claude will load that description by default. And when you ask for something that is related to that, Claude will guarantee that that is invoked. You can also call those skills with the / command and the name that you define it. The problem that I see is that we tend to think about skills as just the skills.md file. So skills.md are basically a recipe. For example, I can have a skill on now I like to review my code, and I might have a long README file, like a markdown file, explaining how do I do that. But they actually can hold different types of things. For example, scripts. If you have things that sometimes you do in the context of a project, like cleaning up a given folder, or moving files around, or calling a given API to extract data, you can actually build a skill for that. For example, recently I had to integrate into in Claude an API that had a couple of hold endpoints that I use once in a while, and I thought, okay, how do I call that API from my Claude session? My first thought was an MCP server, because MCP servers is how we see the connection between different services. But then I thought, why bothering? Why going through that pain of hosting a server for that? While I actually have already a Python script in my machine that I used to use, so I will just put that Python script inside of my skill with a README that explains how to use that Python script. So it's like packaging a small application inside of your Claude folder. Just that. It's super useful. And by the way, you can add things like reference documentation for scenarios like, if this fails, try this. Or if this goes wrong, try that. If you don't know this information, it should be that one. So having a guide on the API, for example. Talking about skills, I have the feeling that we all build our own skills, or we shop around for skills that others do. But we all ignore the fact that Anthropic exposes the skills that they use in the day-to-day to build Claude Code as part of the product. So you actually have a set of skills inside of the product by default. You don't need to do anything with that, and they are quite cool. One that I use a lot for major refactoring, so if I want to touch a ton of files in my system, is using the /patch skill. The /patch will basically do the following. You will split the work in 20 to 50 different, 5 to 50 different units of work, then we'll run several agents to work on those in parallel. So if you have something like, I want to do a major refactoring, I want to upgrade some files, I want to apply this change to many different files inside of my system, you can use the batch to segregate the work, and you don't need to go through the trouble of implementing that yourself. The other one that I use a lot, and I see most people creating skills to do code review, you actually have a great one over there. The name is just /simplify. They basically look how complex is the thing that you have implemented, because LLMs have a tendency to complexity. So if you run /simplify, it comes back with the recommendations for that, and also can implement the changes that were proposed. So instead of coming up with yours, try this once, because they are actually pretty good. The final one is that sometimes you might push something to GitHub, for example. It might trigger a CI/CD, and now it's supposed to deploy to the QA environment or to the testing environment, something like that. So you stay there waiting for that to finish. So you go to the GitHub dashboard and you refresh the page. Is it finished? Is it finished? It's boring. Actually, you can put your agent doing that. There's something there named /loop, and you define the frequency. For example, every 5 minutes, please do this thing. It might be a prompt. It might be something like calling an MCP server. If you have the MCP server from GitHub, you can integrate those two things. And you just wait, or you keep going on your thing, because you don't need to just look into the loop. You just can keep going. Super useful. Talking about skills, and to finalize, is everyone is always looking around what others do. There's many databases nowadays online about skills and all of that. Actually, Anthropic as a marketplace, feels like a marketplace for plugins. You can go and get a plugin. A plugin is a set of things, like let me package hooks, let me package skills, let me package MCP servers, all combined, and distribute that as a plugin. So you might install one of those, or you might install a package, an MCP server, because you see online, okay, there's an MCP server for this tool that I use sometimes. The problem is that now all of those things go to your context window, because by default, they are installed in your user profile. That means that if you are working on project A or in project B, and project A uses GitHub, project B uses Bitbucket, you'll have on the Bitbucket one, for example, the skills and the MCP servers of GitHub as well. That's not great. What you can actually do, and also to guarantee that everyone in your team is using the same MCP servers, is that you can go to your folder and just create this file, .mcp.json. There, you can write the MCPs that you want to share with your team, and you guarantee that they are only loaded in the context of that project. So when you start Claude inside of that session, you will have those MCPs. When you go to other projects, they are not there. So you are saving money and also saving the nightmare that some elements of your team are doing one thing, others are doing the other one. One more thing regarding this being a platform, I don't know if you are familiar with this, but you can actually run Claude Code in headless mode. So you can run Claude, and Claude won't wait for you to do anything. So usually you run Claude, and by the end, after starting Claude, you will see Claude asking for the first prompt, right? Without doing it, nothing happened. But you can actually run in headless mode. So if you provide the --print argument, the thing that is there, summarize this folder, will be the prompt. That means that you can do awesome things like piping. That means that inside of scripts that you used to have and complex PowerShells and all of that, you can integrate Claude for that and asking Claude to be part of that process, being the reasoning part of that complex script. And it doesn't stop waiting for you. So this closes the section of the platform thing. Let's go to the last one, okay? I hope you are still alive. In this one, we are talking about things behind the code. Sometimes, as a context, I'm quite addicted to productivity things, okay? Maybe that's the reason why I'm doing this talk now that I think about it. But I'm quite addicted to it, and note-taking has been one of those that I always struggle with. I know how important it is to take notes, but I never found a tool that I didn't feel like I was working for the tool instead of having the tool working for me. So I used OneNote, I used the Apple Notes, I used Notion, I used every single thing that you can imagine. I used Obsidian and all of that, and always struggled with it. Recently, I was looking to my notes, and I thought, wait, this Obsidian thing is basically an application on top of Markdown files. Markdown files that are in my machine. AI loves Markdown files. Claude likes files in my machine. So why not using both together? So now I have my vault with my notes. Vault is the term of a folder inside of Obsidian that is just plain old Markdown files. And I can ask questions about the things that I write there. I can ask to summarize my notes. I can ask to, for example, pretty cool thing, create connections between those notes, and Obsidian will do things like those that are awesome to put in a slide, but they are useless, to be honest. But you can also embed your Claude Code as part of the user experience, as a terminal, okay? So when you are working on something, or you want to pull information online from a website to your note, you can do all of that in the same way that you do it with code. One of the problems with the name Claude Code is that it creates the assumption that it's only for code, but it's for so much more than that. Claude actually has 3 products, the Claude.com, Claude Cowork, and Claude Code. Claude Code is the most powerful one, and in the hands of someone that is comfortable with a terminal, is awesome. The other thing that I use Claude for, do you know when you go to a one-on-one meeting and you need to explain what you have been working, or let's say every 3 months you have your evaluation period and you need to show your achievements and things like that? That's quite hard because now you need to go back into Notes, into your Jira, good luck, or you need to go to things like, for example, your calendar, trying to find what happened. Actually, you can ask Claude Code to do that. Because, for example, for code contributions, Claude has access to those. Okay? Claude maintains a context of what you have been doing, so you can ask for a summary of what you have done last week or what you have done last month, and then you can have that, for example, if you want, you can actually create a skill, put that skill somewhere inside of a folder or in your user profile, And when it comes the moment to send that to your boss, you just run that skill and you have the thing ready. So it can be used for those types of things as well. Or if you want something a bit more programmatic, something that feels like our day-to-day, do you know when you have a ton of files and you want to extract information out of it, instead of writing a script, you can use the headless mode. Let's say that you have a ton of log files in a folder, or your event viewer on Windows has a ton of errors, and you want to understand what is there. You can run Claude in the, as a script, right? And you don't expect Claude to open, but you'll find the summary for you. You can even pipe the outcome to a given file if you need. Final one is the following. You might be like me, but I have that downloads folder in my machine, and that folder only works in one direction, that is growing and growing and growing. Until the day that I get the warning saying, your disk is almost full, and I need to delete stuff. But I never know what I have there, and I'm in fear of losing something that I will never need. That's the truth. But I don't want to delete things, because who knows? But look into something like this, it can be quite scary. I have, last week I had 1,626 items over there. So how should I know what I should delete? It will take a ton of time to go through all of this. The worst part is that some of them are actually folders, so there's even more items than those. So what I thought was, why not putting my Claude Code doing that for me? So I opened Claude Code and I prompted, let's go through this folder, the downloads, you can see it there, and organize it by type. Because by the end, I will see folders like installers, that I don't care about them. Code, for example, if it's important, would be on my GitHub. So those I know that I can delete them right away. For the other ones, now I have them organized and I know what I'm looking for. So I end up with something like this. So the goal here is that you start thinking about Claude as much more than something that is capable of writing code, reviewing code, and fixing bugs. Okay? It's actually an extremely powerful tool that you can use in your day-to-day to simplify your life. I hope you learned one or two things with me today. If you apply one or two, I will be super happy, to be honest. But if you don't run any of those commands, at least run one that you can learn a lot with it. Because I learned more with that command than by reading LinkedIn posts, to be honest. That is the /insights. If you run the /insights, actually, you will get a report from Claude explaining how do you use Claude in your day-to-day, explaining what you can do to improve your workflows, explaining what usually is the types of works that you do and types of skills that you could create. Something bigger than this, okay? If you go through this one, you will learn a lot about the things that you do in your day-to-day, and for sure, if you didn't learn something with me, you will learn something with Claude. I hope you learned something with me today. To be honest, if there's something that I didn't mention and you actually love in Claude Code, please come by and let me know. And if you have any question, I will be happy to answer it afterwards. And I will see you around. Have a great conference. Thank you.